tutorial here on the threshold solver. So essentially, the threshold solver identifies when an indicator is above or below some threshold level, right? Usually you just hear people just say, well, do something when the stochastic is above 80, the 80 level, right? Well, that 80 level is a threshold level, right? Some threshold at which you take some kind of action, right? So, so a threshold solver helps you identify when an indicator, primarily, or I should say the most common use case are indicators, that oscillate inside their own subpanel here, right? So an indicator that, ranges between, 0 and 100, or maybe it's the CCI, right, where it goes negative all the way to positive, right? Same thing with the MACD, right? MACD oscillates above and below the zero line, right? So you can identify whenever these indicators are inside of some kind of normal range, or when those indicators are outside some kind of range there, right? And the values of those ranges are threshold levels. So also the threshold solver can be used to identify a signal from certain indicators, right, that actually output their signal as a value, and we'll get to that last. So, right, first let's kind of focus on the primary use here for the threshold solver. So I'm just going to run through some examples here. We'll do the stochastics first, and then the CCI, and then the MACD here. Right, so there we go. We'll stretch that out here. All right, so let's grab a threshold solver, and we're going to be using a bunch of these, obviously. Yeah, so we'll identify when the stochastics is above 80 for a long output or below 20 for a short output. All right. So first thing is change our input to whatever indicator we are interested in. Let's do a little search here. There we go, stochastics. And again, I'm just going to use the standard settings, periods there for all this. And we're going to look at the %D, right? So now the threshold solver, most often than not, you do need to go in and adjust the threshold rules here. So let's open up the rules window here, right? Now, the only time you don't need to adjust your rules is if you're just checking to see if your indicator is above or below 0, right? That's our standard here, right? So we're checking to see if the stochastic is above 0 or below 0. But of course, the stochastic doesn't go below 0 here. So let's put in our values here that we're looking for, right? So above 80, or less than or below 20. Right? If we hit apply, there we go. And let's see here. It does look like our stochastic is below 20. Let's go ahead and include the equal condition here as well for both of these, like so. And all right, let's do a little chart reload here. There we go. Okay, so there is our short output there. And let's see here. I'm going to do one more thing here. I'm going to go increase the racing stripe opacity, make that a little more visible. There we go. Now that short stands out a little better there. All right, so there we go. Right, so you can see, right, if you need some kind of oscillator, in some overbought situation or oversold situation, right, the threshold solver is the one that'll do that for you. And vice versa, right? You might be, so this would be, this kind of output here would be, going with the trend, right? So if the market's moving higher, right, your stochastic is typically going to go overbought. So if you want to go with the trend, there you go. But I think it's fair to say probably most traders here, it seems like, the questions I get here, most are using this for a counter trend, right? So they're identifying when the market is too oversold, and then they want to take, right, that pullback trade. So if you want the reverse of that, then we just got to reverse all of the outputs here. Well, yeah. So let's change this to less than or equal to 20. And then this will be greater than or equal to 80, right? So, setting these up is the proper way to do it. What I would call best practices there, like so. All right, and there we go. So now our output, right, is completely reversed. The shortcut and the dirty way of doing this is just using the swap button. All right, there you go. So everything was reversed there. But when you use the swap button there, then your naming convention is going to be wrong, right? So it's easy to, look at a solver and think it's, checking for one condition when in fact you swapped it and it's doing the other, right? So it's a quick way to, confuse yourself. So it's always better to make sure, right, you set it up correctly and adjust your name correctly as well. Right. So there we go. So now, the naming convention I like is I like to put my long name first and my short name second. So this tells me I'm getting a long output when the stochastic is below 20, and I'm getting a short output when the stochastic is above 80. So whatever kind of naming convention works for you, that's subjective there. So let's see here. Let's make a copy and I'll paste this here, and I'll actually leave both of these in place. And let's go in and adjust the rules window here. There we go. All right, so we have both versions of that for the stochastic. So next, let's look at the CCI. So, right, this is basically going to be the same thing, except the CCI goes into negative numbers there. So let's pull up another threshold solver, like so. All right, so we'll check for when it's above 150 or below negative 150. All right, let's see. There's our CCI. And again, I'm just using the default periods there. All right, CCI only has one plot. Don't have to worry about checking that. So now we just go into the threshold rules. And right, so again, the default is, above 0 or below 0, right? So there we go. We can see whenever that CCI is right above 0, we're getting a long output or a short output, right? So hopefully, by now you've kind of gathered that probably another most common use for the threshold solver is for trend filtering, right? Filtering out your signals based on some indicator there, right? Identifying, either an extended long trend, right, or an extended short trend, something like that, right? So threshold solver is most commonly used for filtering your signals out. So, all right, let's plug in those values there. So this time I'm going to just put in negative 150. And let's also include the equal symbol there. There. All right. And there we have it. Right, 150. And negative 150, where is it? There we go. My cursor is approximately on negative 150. Or let's do something else. Like maybe you want to know when your oscillator or your indicator is in the middle, is in between a zone, right? When it's not oversold or not overbought, but just right, right? Like Goldilocks there. So, yeah, let's make a copy here and paste that down here. So let's see here. What should we do? All right. So we want to know when the CCI is between 100 and negative 100, right? So we're going to go into the rules window here. And let's see here. Let's generate a long output when it's greater than, there's a couple of ways we can mix and match this here. So I'll say when the CCI is greater than 100 or less than 100 there. Right, so I'm sorry, greater than negative 100 and below positive 100. And when we take a look at this, right, when the CCI is in between these, let's see here, yeah, these inner dashed lines here, right, is 100 and negative 100, right? You'll notice we get a long and a short output together there. Right. So if we really wanted to identify only between those two ranges, then we need to remove the short only output, right, or the long only output. And we can do that using the long short modifier function node here. There, connect that in, and we're going to use the minimum mode there. And I do like to rename the long short modifiers here to tell me what mode it's set to, right? And there we go. So now we know when the CCI is right in the sweet spot here, right in the middle there. And right, most commonly, when your indicator's in between some zone, usually that is good for both a long or a short trade, either one, right? So most commonly, right, you'll want a long and a short output at the same time when your oscillator is in between some range. So, right, again, most commonly, you know. So there we go, right? The threshold solver can identify when your indicator is in between some zone there as well. So let's see here. Actually, I think there's another way we can do this. There we go. Oh, no, that's actually equals. Sorry, I was thinking of the comparison solver. Yeah, there's another way to do this with the comparison solver here. So this is the threshold solver. So, all right, yeah, we'll skip that. And there. Let's see. All right, let's do one more indicator example here. the MACD here. So there's our zero line, the dashed white line there. So let's pull up another threshold solver. Oh, wrong one. All right, so with the MACD, right, what's most common is, is it above or below the zero line? Right. All right, so let's load in our MACD. Again, just using the standard periods there. And the MACD does have 3 lines there. So we'll just kind of focus on the MACD line itself there. And this time, the default settings, right, for the threshold is the indicator above 0 or below 0. And right there we have it. So, all right, pretty straightforward there. All right, let's make a copy of that. Paste it there. And let's see here. Let's identify when the MACD is above 20, right, or below negative 20. Something like that. All right, so we need to go into the threshold rules and just make those numeric adjustments. Right, put 20 in there, negative 20 in there, and might want to include the equal sign, right? Personal choice there. And there we have it. So whenever the MACD is, kind of in between 20 and negative 20, no output. Let's see if we actually have. Yeah, today has been a strong up day, so our MACD may not go below negative 20. There we go. Let's see, when is this? Oh, this is yesterday evening. All right. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. And let's see. Just to repeat, kind of like the last example here. Let's say we want to know when the MACD is between 20 and negative 20. There. All right, so adjust the name. And next, let's go into the rules window here and adjust our settings here. So, yeah, we'll just set this to now negative 20, like so. And this will be, a positive 20, like so. Right? So we're going to get a long output when the MACD is above negative 20, or a short output when it's less than 20. You can reverse these here. So, right, that's how I set up the CCI, just to demonstrate here. Yeah, let me reverse these conditions. Right, so we're interested when the solver gives us a long and a short output at the same time, right? So here, right, our MACD is below negative 20, and so we have a long only output, right? So again, that's the opposite of what we did over here for the CCI, right? And once again, we're going to need this long short modifier here set to the minimum mode. So Let me just copy that, and I can paste it down here, save a little time, like that. And so there we go. So whenever that MACD is outside of that 20 to negative 20 range, then there's no output. So we're identifying when that MACD is only inside that range. There. All right, let's take a look at reading signals. So this is probably the next most common use case for the threshold solver. So let me put, let's close this out here. So let me put this NinjaTrader indicator on here, the candlestick pattern, right? Candlestick pattern does have a signal output here. Let's see, morning stars, yeah, good enough. All right, let's see, I don't want to send alerts, show the count, sure, good enough. All right, yeah, so we'll look for the morning star there. Oh, look at that. All right, we actually have one right in front of us. All right, great. And let's see, which bar is it? All right, I think it's that bar. We'll find out here in just a moment. All right, grab another threshold solver. There. All right, so we're looking for a candlestick pattern signal. Let's connect that up, and let's plug in our candlestick indicator. There it is. All right, so it does default to the morning star. Trend strength is 4, right? And you can see this indicator has a plot called pattern found, right? So that's the signal when the indicator identifies that pattern, right? And this plot will become a +1 when that pattern is found, right? So that's something that, you know, what the value is of that plot, or right, that output, right? You have to go back to the vendor or whoever created this indicator. You'll have to get those values from that person. And so there we go. Yeah, I got lucky. All right, so I did pick the right bar. So yeah, so let's go into the rules window here. Right now, right. So the reason why we get a long signal here is because, right, we're looking for a value that's greater than 0. And there we go. Now, if this was a short candlestick pattern, right, then you would need to turn on the short output here, but then also, you know, turn off the long output here. So if I hit apply, right, there we go. So now we have a short, right? So if we were looking for a short candlestick pattern, we do need to set up the rules window so that we're looking for the numeric value, right, that the indicator outputs here. So this is atypical. So most third-party vendors, they will give you, you'll want to keep the default settings here for most third-party vendors, right? So typically you'll get a positive value when you're getting a long signal, and you'll get a negative number when there's a short signal, right? But because the candlestick pattern, right, it only identifies one pattern at a time, so it doesn't identify a long pattern and a short pattern together. So I guess, so it makes sense that, right, because of that, this particular indicator only outputs a positive value for both long patterns and short candlestick patterns, right? So yeah, so you do, need to make sure you fully understand, what the values are that it's outputting there. So that way you can set up the rules window correctly here. All right, so, but again, using the default settings works probably for 98%, of the third-party indicators out there, right? So, let's see here. All right, I'll leave it like that. And let's take a look at one more indicator here. So, Lizard Trader, or Lizard Indicators, has a better volume, and I do believe this better volume is available on other websites, such as, was it NexusFi, Big Mike's, formerly Big Mike's. You might find this indicator. It might be available on Ninja's app share. I'm not sure, but right. But the point is, right, this better volume here gives us, or it identifies various volume bars here, right? So it has a climax churn bar, all right, just regular climax, just a churn, low volume, right, and this your typical up close, down close bars, and a doji bar, right? So it has all these different colors, and a well-written indicator will have an output, that a numeric output that will identify these colors, right? Because colors cannot be read in NinjaTrader. So you cannot identify when an indicator is red or blue. Reading a color is not possible with NinjaTrader, right? So all of these conditions, while visually you'll see them as colors on the chart, but to communicate from one indicator to another indicator, all of these conditions had to be converted to a numeric value, right? And that's what we'll take a look at here in just a moment. So let's get that indicator on the chart. And there we go. All right, shrink all those down. All right, right, so there's the different colors. And so let's try, and we'll read the better volume indicator to identify those various conditions here. All right. All right, so again, our input, let's plug in that better volume indicator. There we go. Yeah, this does actually have some settings here that will need to be matched up with what's on your chart. So yeah, we have a long period, absolute volume. Yeah, I believe those are the only two settings that matter. Again, you need to contact the vendor, to see what settings actually, will change, how the indicator calculates there. And let's see here, right? So we have two outputs. So we have a plot, which is just the base volume, right? So this plot is what we see on the chart. And then we have a data series. So this tells us the bar type, right? So in other words, this is telling us the color, right? The color of those volume bars there. So that is what we actually want to read there. And let me double check, those settings there. And absolute volume in 20. Yeah, okay. Let's see, weak signals is off. All right. So I think I have my, yeah, it looks, yeah, I have my settings matching up. What's on the chart. So there we go. All right, so now let's figure out how do we identify these certain colors here. Right, so let's open up the rules window here. And again, this is where you need to go to the documentation, right, for these custom indicators here. But I know that basically this indicator, certain values identify certain colors here. So let's see what 2 does. There we go. So 2 identifies this orange color, right? And let's see what 1 does. There we go. So 1 identifies the cyan bars there, right? And you'll notice this time I'm actually using the equal symbol, right? Because, right, each color is assigned a specific numeric value, right? So if I said, okay, let's, look for something, greater than 0, if I hit apply, right, we get a long output on every single bar, right? So, so in this specific indicator, since each number identifies a certain color, you do need to put in that specific value, that specific number, that applies to each of those colors there. Let's put in 3 and 1. Let's see what we get here. So again, right, that cyan volume bar is number 1. Let's see, what's number 3? Yeah, it doesn't look like I'm getting any number 3s here. Yeah, you know what? I do have the original version here. Yeah, I should update that. So that could be the reason why, there could be a problem with the code, and the number 3s aren't being outputted, correctly. All right, let's go and see if we can identify number 4s and see what number 4 is. Yeah, I don't see number 4s either. Well, maybe there are no 3 and 4s. Again, I don't know this indicator all that well, just well enough to use it as an example here. Yeah, I'm not seeing any long output. Let me just double check. Let's reload. Well, all right. Yeah, maybe there's no number 5s. Let's see if there's number 6s. There we go. All right, so we have number 6s. So let's see. Number 6 looks like the white ones. All right. Yep, the white volume bars. There. All right. So again, another example here of reading a indicator's signal output. Right. So with the BetterVolume, right, it has this output called bar type, and that's what allows us to identify each of the different colors there. And that is a job for the threshold solver to be able to read those signal outputs there, right? So another comment here. Let me go back to the candlestick pattern indicator, right? So we know that the candlestick pattern only outputs a value of +1 there, right, when a pattern is found, right? So some indicators, I have come across a small handful of indicators that might give you a positive one, for say maybe like a weak trade signal, and then it might give you a positive 2 for a stronger signal, and who knows, maybe even a 3, right, for a very strong signal. So again, you really need to go contact the vendor to see what values are being output for different for different types of signals there, right? So if you're only looking, in this fictitious example I'm making up here, if you only want to look for strong signals, right, then you do something like this, right? Any value that's greater than or equal to 2, so 2s and 3s would be identified by the threshold solver, would identify 2s and 3s, right, the stronger signals, and then this negative or equal to -2. So for shorts, right, so this would identify the medium to strong short signals out of a custom indicator, right? So yeah, so get, know your indicator that you're using, and know what values you're looking for coming out of that indicator there. Right? So of course this doesn't apply to the candlestick, but this is just a kind of a fictitious example here, or theoretical example. So let's put these back to the way they are there. Actually, I'll leave it like that. And let's see. Let's make up another example here. Let's say you're using some kind of service here that provides you support resistance levels, right? Some service that's manually calculating, kind of like their own version of traders' pivot levels, right? And so you might want to know if the market ever goes above some, one of those pivot levels, right? And if the market is above one of those pivot values there, price values, then you only want to take long signals at that point. So with the threshold solver, right, so we can input our own manual price values here. So we're going to change the input now to price, right? So we want to know, right, if the market is above or below some certain level here, and I'll have to find something that kind of works. Let's see, I'm on the NQ. All right, so I'm going to open up the rules window here, and I'll use the equals. I'll include the equals condition. Yeah, all right. So let's put that number in and there. All right, so those two numbers work for today's market here, right? So, so if you want to filter out, right, your signals here and say, I only want to go long when the market is above 1900, or you only want shorts when the market is below 1800. And if the market is in the middle, then no trades, right? So there we go. So we can set up our, let's set that correctly. There we go. Greater than. So if the close is greater than or equal to 19,000, then we can take longs. Or if the close is, right, less than 1880. All right, if we take a look at that, so let's see, this was yesterday. Let's go to today. Yeah, there we go. Basically, today the market's been straight up. So, all right, it's been above 1900 for most of the day, but the overnight session, right, was below that level, right? So you, again, this is just an example of being able to put in your own manual price levels there, and and filtering out the market here, right, or filtering out your signals when the market is above some level or below some level, right? Or let's see here. Yeah, I can reverse these conditions. Right, so again, depending on how you might be using these discretionarily calculated price levels, right, for the day, so in this setup, right, we're going to get a long output. Okay, no, hold on, let's see. Yeah, that would have been a bad example. Okay, so I'm going to put in 18,800 for the long, and I'll put in 19,000 for the short. Right, so if we look at this, so this now says, all right, we can trade long and short, right? So we can trade long and short when we're in between those two values, those two price ranges. But then once you go above 1900, then right, it's long only trades. So we can see the short output disappears, right? And vice versa, if the market is below 18,800, then you can only take short trades. But when that market is in between those two values, right, then you can take longs and shorts. Right? So, again, you can put in your own manual, support resistance levels there, pivot levels there, and compare it to price, right? And you can get various different outputs there. It's all a matter of, what greater than or equal to conditions, you're looking for there. Let me take a moment here to see if I can think of any other more rare use cases here. Yeah, I guess another way to look at this, volatility, right? Again, this uses the ATR to measure volatility. Yeah, we could check to see if the ATR is above some level here, and so the market has enough volatility in it, to trade. Again, the ATR is not much different than what we've done before with these other oscillating indicators, right? But the ATR will actually the setting for the ATR specifically, it will be subtly different. Yeah, there is a slight difference here. Let's see. All right, 14 period. Yep. All right, so let's pick a value here. Let's say anything above 13. Yeah. All right. There. I'll put it up here with the other kind of oscillating indicators. All right. So there we go. We're going to check if the ATR is above or equal to 13, right? Greater or equal to 13. All right, let's plug in our ATR indicator here. There it is. And again, I'm just using the standard default, right? It only has one output. We're good to go. So we just need to go into the output rules window there, and we're checking for a value greater than 13. Now, the ATR, so this is kind of the uniqueness of looking at the ATR, why it's subtly different here, is that the ATR doesn't pick a trend direction, right? The ATR knows no knowledge of the market trend, right? It's just looking at volatility, right? Same thing with like volume, right? Volume doesn't tell you what direction the market's going. It's just how much trading, right, is going on here. So in this case, if we want to identify when the market is volatile, or at least volatile enough to be trading into, right, then we can put our volatility value in there, and this time both the long and a short need to be greater than this value here. And so when we look at that, so now we get a long and a short output together, right, telling us, okay, the market does have enough volatility in it that we can trade it. Yeah. So yeah, the uniqueness here is that we set the rules window up to give us a long and a short output together here for this, for this non-directional indicator, the ATR. We could do the same thing, with volume. We could say, all right, if the volume is greater than some level, right, as well. We'll go ahead and throw another one in there, right? And I'm not sure what a good volume is, but let me try 1500 to start with here. Yeah, we'll see. So let's change our input type. We could just change it to volume, like so, or you could plug in the volume indicator in there if you wanted to, but I'll just use the volume type. And then again, let's go into the rules window here, and so we're looking for a volume that's greater than 1500. Let's see if we actually get that. Oh, hold on. What did I do? Oh, I didn't quite change that one correctly. There we go. And all right, so there we go. Whenever our volume, right, is greater than some level, there we go. Again, volume is non-directional, right? So you want to generate a long and a short output together. So, right. Okay. And I think it should be fairly obvious, that maybe if your system works better when the market is kind of consolidating, right? Less volatile, right? Then all we need to do is go into the threshold rules and say, all right, let's make sure the ATR is less than 13, right? It's underneath 13, and so it's safe for my system to trade when that volatility is low, right? When the ATR is low. And so we could identify the opposite condition there. Okay. So, there, I'll put that back so that way the conditions match my name. Yeah, just a little tip there, right? If you go and change the conditions, yeah, just try and remember to change the name that you might have given it there. So, all right, I think that kind of rounds out a good tutorial for the threshold solver.